All right. Hello. Okay, so let me just readjust that camera now. Okay. So my name is Omar Abasad. It's 5:39 p.m. May 13th, 2020. So I'm going to talk today about some more cases against companies and school boards and so on regarding electromagnetic exposure, EMF exposure. I'm going to outline as many cases as possible, just to prove to you that, number one, it is a health risk. Some people do react well, let me just say that some people have a more intense reaction to EMF fields than others. So if one person goes into a room with high frequencies and say, well, it didn't affect me, it doesn't necessarily mean that the other person that goes in will not be affected. So I was surprised that every time I Google, I get lots of cases that was brought to court and had positive outcomes. So I'm just going to read very sorry, as you can tell, I'm slightly distracted because I'm being hit. Okay, so let me just flip to that screen that I Googled. And this is, okay, so my eyes are being, yeah, that's what I thought. Suddenly went a little bit blurry there. MUDITALAB, Muddy Talab.com. Okay. I mean, the link itself is not that relevant as long as the cases that's referred to on these websites are valid. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a well-known website. So this is dated August 31st, 2017. By, I can't for the life of me pronounce this word. The last name is Katowski. So the health effects of mobile radiation. The health effects of mobile radiation are sometimes even discussed in a courtroom. And excuse me, I'm just gonna pour myself a cup of tea here because my mouth gets really, really dry before I start reading. My mouth is constantly hit. Yeah. Okay. Live TV. All right. So the health effects of mobile radiation are sometimes even discussed in a courtroom. Having read about a few cases which concerned different types of radiation and its impact on human health, we wanted to share some examples with you. These are the first legal cases worldwide, which led us to believe that there will be more of them. You better believe there's going to be more of them with 5G rollout. Some of these cases are connected to electro-hypersensitivity and others relate to brain tumors, which have developed in people who use mobile phones excessively. These cases support the fact that mobile radiation could affect our health in various ways. Marine Richard Franz, this is a woman in France. 2013, there was a case of a 39-year-old woman, Marine Richard, who complained that she's allergic to electromagnetic radiation. She has known about this since she was a child because, as she remembers, when she was a little girl, she could actually hear the signals from TVs or radios, even if they were turned off but plugged in. She believed it was the sound of radiation. And she's right. There are voices that could be voices, sounds, and it could be voices if somebody are deliberately doing this. They could piggyback messages on existing frequencies around us. Subliminal messaging. And these some of these subliminal messaging could be picked up if you're chipped. Of course, it'll make it easier for it to be picked up, but it can be picked up by your nervous system, not only through the ear as sound, but as frequencies that's picked up in different parts of the nervous system. Maureen heard about EHS for the first time when she was an adult. Her life became very hard due to the fact that living in the city exposed her to all kinds of electronic devices. Finally, she was forced to move out. The electromagnetic radiation was too strong in the town, and I think a lot of people will be moving out the city too. And she moved to, right now, today, she moved to a barn in the mountains with no electricity, and her life was drastically changed. So let's skip ahead here. Maureen Richards' symptoms of being electro-hypersensitive were headaches, fatigue, and problems with short-term memory. Short-term memory. And sometimes I suffer with that as well. Spot, I lose, not lose. I take longer to retrieve words that should come faster to me. However, EHS, and that's not age. Although I turned 60 recently, age is not a factor with me. However, EHS is not officially considered to be an illness. When she was in court, she had to highlight the fact that all of the symptoms really made her life harder. Due to her being sensitive to electromagnetic radiation, she could not live where the EMF occurs. Okay, fine. So the judge saw her point, and Maureen finally won a disability grant. So on the basis of in modern times, electronic devices are everywhere. So EHS really excludes her from living an average life. So she won a disability grant of £800 per month for 3 years. Maureen said that the most important thing for her was the fact that her case was a breakthrough for people affected by electromagnetic hypersensitivity, EHS. It was one of the first worldwide. She allowed the court to publish their decision, so you can read the papers here. So here's a link to the details. Now, after 4 years from the ruling, Maureen claimed to be healthy. She has developed a method of dealing with electro-hypersensitivity that has been helping other people who suffer from the condition. She believes that the symptoms are real and physical and not psychological, so there are ways to control them, not only by limiting exposure to radiation. She also is the founder of Electro-Hypersensitive Association in France. You can find her website. There's a link there. There's another one here in Italy. Innocente Marcellini. In 2012, the Italian Supreme Court ruled that there is a causal link between mobile phone use and brain tumors in a landmark case. This case was about Marcellini, a 60-year-old retired businessman who argued that the excessive use of his mobile phone caused a benign brain tumor. The tumor caused his face to become partially paralyzed. Marcolini had been using a mobile phone for around 6 hours every day for 12 years. After the ruling, Marcolini said he didn't care about the money, but he had wanted the problem to become public because people still don't know the risks. He used to talk with his phone pressed to his ear, and the tumor was located in the trigeminal nerve, close to where the phone touched his head. Fortunately, the tumor was non-cancerous. It is important to note that the court sided with the aggrieved because they were concerned by the results of the scientific studies on mobile radiation and its impact on human health. There is no direct link between tumors and mobile phone use, but research is ongoing and more evidence has shown that such a connection may be a concern. Roberto, this is the third one, Roberto Romeo, Italy. Roberto Romeo is a 57-year-old Italian telecom worker. He used to talk on his company-issued mobile phone for 3 to 4 hours each day for 15 years. After all of these years, Romeo started feeling as though his right ear was blocked, which made it difficult for him to do his job. Roberto decided to look for medical help. Unfortunately, his inconvenience turned out to be a brain tumor, he said in one of the interviews. The norms say that using a mobile phone for 1 hour a day is considered to be intense use. I went well beyond the limits. Happily, the tumor was benign, but an acoustic nerve had to be removed. Romeo lost his hearing in one ear. He was able to prove in court that the intense usage of mobile phones was to blame for his disability. However, he did not sue the company that he worked for. Instead, he demanded a disability payment from the Italian Workers' Compensation Authority. As evidence, Romeo's lawyers cited a partial finding of the ongoing US study run by National Toxicology Program, which investigated the incidence of brain and heart tumors in male rats exposed to doses of radiofrequency radiation. I wrote about that study here, and there's a link. Finally, the court awarded Romeo a lifelong monthly compensation of 500 euros. Number 4, telecommunications engineer Spain. In July 2016, a ruling by the High Court of Madrid claimed that a telecommunication engineer whose name remains unknown to the public is permanently disabled and unable to work in his profession due to electro hypersensitivity syndrome, EHS. He was suffering from a number of symptoms such as headaches, sleep disorders, and muscle aches. His symptoms intensified while he was at work, but the electromagnetic fields were present at where the electromagnetic fields were present at a higher power. The court decided that he was not able to continue working as a telecommunications engineer and advised him to change profession for one which he is not connected to using electronic devices, which is not connected. Change profession for one which is not connected to using electronic devices. Are there any, could you imagine any office without Wi-Fi or computers? So he demanded that he should be given some form of disability. So the court seems to have ruled against him in this case. The court decided that he was not able to continue working as a telecommunication engineer and advised him to change profession. He demanded that he should be given some form of disability because Wi-Fi is everywhere, I guess, computers, but his petition was dismissed. So finally, the Supreme Court of Madrid, so he took it to the upper courts, and finally just the Supreme Court of Madrid not only dismissed his case, but also gave him a piece of advice. He requested to recognize his condition as an absolute permanent disability, but the truth is that EHS people can work, just not in certain environments, such as those with electricity. His electro hypersensitivity was accredited within a group of non-specific allergies. Okay, so in this case, he did not win, but that doesn't mean to say that he didn't have a case. It just means that that the court didn't agree with him. Maybe he didn't convince the court. This case shows that finding help if you are or suspect you are hypersensitive is hard. First, you need to prove you're reacting negatively to the electromagnetic fields. Then you need to prove that you're not able to work because of your condition, and there is no way you can change your job. So that's why he failed, because he couldn't prove that he couldn't find another job elsewhere. This is easier said than done. Yeah. So there's a bunch of references here. So I delve a little bit deeper into some of the links. And that one crashed. So I have a lot of crashed links. My browsers crash all the time on me. So this one here is mobile phones can cause brain tumors, Italian court rules. This might be a more detailed version of what I just read. Yeah, it is. Mobile phones can cause brain tumors in Italian courts as rule. Yeah. So the same case, Roberto Romeo. For the first time in the world, a court has recognized a causal link between inappropriate use of mobile phone and a brain tumor, and that's what's important in this case. And so if I can get back this one to load up. Yeah. So this one is about Maureen Richards. So this is the more detailed version of the cases that I just read. So if I were to do another search, just Google it. So my eyes are tearing up because it's being hit. Okay. So there is a lot of repetition here, but those two cases seem to be landmark cases. Okay, so I'm sure there are many more. Let's see if people actually started suing on 5G. Okay, so let's see what this one says. So this is in the New York Times, and it's probably going to bump me out because I need a subscription to read it. The 5G health hazard that isn't. How one scientist and his inaccurate chart led to unwarranted fears of wireless technology. Okay, so that's contrary. But you need to look at both sides as well. Let's see if it will let me go in. No, there is yeah, it's behind a paywall. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so oops. My screen just disappeared again. Oh. There was a study as well about radar in the military. I remember reading this one. Let me see if I can find it. Radar health hazards. And this is the kind of stuff that you people should do. You should find a time to do this, because now especially it's very, very relevant. It's part of our environment. So electromagnetic fields and public health, radars and human health. And this is on the World Health Organization. So radar systems detect the presence, direction, or range of aircraft, ships, or other usually moving objects. This is achieved by sending pulses of high frequency electromagnetic fields, EMF. Invented some 60 years ago, radar systems have been widely used for navigation, aviation, national defense, and weather forecasting. Their primary objective is individual and collective safety and protection. So radar is used for direction or range of aircrafts or other moving objects. So the EMF around me is always a little bit high. So I am being tracked. People who live or routinely work around radars have expressed concerns about long-term adverse effects of these symptoms on health, including cancer, reproductive malfunction, cataracts, and changes in behavior or development of children. A recent example has been the alleged increase in testicular cancer in police using speed control handheld radar guns. It is important, and this is on the WHO's website, it is important to distinguish between perceived and real dangers that radars pose, as well as to understand the rationale behind existing international standards and protective measures used today. So it goes into details. Radar systems send electromagnetic waves and pulses and not continuously. This makes the average power emitted much lower than the peak pulse power. So these are the factors that reduces exposure. Radars are directional, and RF energies they generate is contained in beams that are very narrow and resemble the beam of a spotlight. RF levels away from the beam falls off rapidly. In most cases, these levels are thousands of times lower than the main beam. Well, if you're in the beam, let me tell you, you'd know the difference. Many radars have antennas which are continuously rotating or varying their elevation by a nodding motion, thus constantly changing the direction of the beam. Areas where dangerous human exposure may occur are normally inaccessible to unauthorized personnel. Some of the common types of radar: air traffic control, weather radar, military radars. And numerous and vary from very large institutions, which have large peak 1 MW or greater. That's It wouldn't be milliwatt. It's a capital M. And the average of an average power is kilowatts, milliwatts, probably milliwatts. A small military fire control radar is typically found in aircrafts. Okay, so that goes on. Then marine radars, speed control radars, police. The average output power is very low, a few milliwatts, so the units are not considered hazardous to health. Possible health effects. Most studies conducted to date examine health effects other than cancer. They probe into physiological and thermoregulatory responses, behavioral changes, and effects such as the induction of lens opacities, cataracts, and that's behavioral changes and effects such as induction of lens, the eye, of course, and adverse reproductive outcome following acute exposure to relatively high levels of RF fields. Okay, so it goes on. Cancer-related studies. Many epidemiological studies have addressed possible links between exposure to RF and excess risk of cancer. However, because of differences in design and execution of these studies, their results are difficult to interpret. So I had commented on this before. It depends on the study. Every study is not made equal. A number of national and international peer review groups have concluded that there is no clear evidence of links between RF exposure and excess risk of cancer. WHO has also concluded there is no convincing scientific evidence that exposure to RF shortens the lifespan of humans. A lot of people will disagree. Thermal effects, well, everybody agrees on thermal effects. Studies have also suggest adverse effect may occur in humans to whole body or localized exposure to RF fields, sufficient to increase tissue temperatures by greater than 1 degree Celsius. So that's interesting because I have increases up to 5 degrees Celsius in my body. So let me just read this whole paragraph. Thermal effects. RF fields have been studied in animals, including primates. The earliest signs of an adverse health consequence found in animals as the level of RF fields increase include reduced endurance, aversion of the field, and decreased ability to perform mental tasks. These studies also suggest adverse effects may occur in humans subject to whole body or localized exposure to RF fields, sufficient to increase tissue temperatures by greater than 1 degree Celsius. Possible effects include induction of eye cataracts and various physiological and thermoregulatory responses as body temperature increases. These effects are well established and form the scientific basis for restricting occupational and public exposure to RF fields. So thermal effects is agreed upon by all. Non-thermal effects, exposure to RF levels too low to involve heating, has been reported by several groups to alter calcium ion mobility, which is responsible for transmitting information to tissue cells. However, these effects are not sufficiently established to provide a basis for restricting human exposure. Exposure to very intense pulsed RF fields, similar to those used by radar systems, has been reported to suppress the startle response and evoke body movements in conscious mice. Evoke body movements. In addition, people with normal hearing have perceived pulsed RF fields with frequencies between 200 megahertz and 6.5 gigahertz. This is called microwave hearing effects. This is on the WHO's website. Microwave hearing effects. The sound has been variously described as a buzzing, clicking, hissing, or popping sound, depending on the RF pulsing characteristics. Prolonged or repeated exposure may be stressful and should be avoided where possible. And I hear these sounds around the unit at night, late at night sometimes. This is not voices in the head. Don't confuse microwave hearing as voices in the head. Voices in the head is a completely different technology, and it also uses microwave technology. These are hissing, popping. This is like tinnitus, the same idea: buzzing, clicking, hissing, popping sound. These are different frequency levels. RF shocks and burns. Well, we know about that. All frequencies less than 100 megahertz, RF burns, at frequencies less than 100 megahertz, RF burns or shock may result from charges induced on metallic objects situated near radars. Persons standing in RF fields can also have high local absorption of the fields in areas of their bodies with small cross-sectional areas, such as ankles. In general, because of the higher frequencies that most modern radar systems operate, combined with the small beam widths, the potential for such effects is very small. Electromagnetic interference. Radars can cause electromagnetic interference in other electronic equipment. The threshold for these effects are often well below guidance levels for human exposure. Ignition of flammable liquids and explosives. RF fields can ignite flammable liquids and explosives through the induction of currents. That's how hot it is. So there's international standards and recommendations for protection. That's on the WHO's website. Okay. So I have posted some data from the modem where the EMF fields readings are very high, and the RF fields readings are over 1,000 milliwatts, which is 1 watt per meter, which is probably small. The reading is probably low, maybe, I'm not sure, it depends, I haven't done the research. But if you're continuously exposed to it, that would be a factor, right? And what do you do from here? I could see what is happening to you. Never break down and cry, girlfriend. Well, sometimes crying is good. You're strong being on here talking. I just want to let you know you're not alone. Oh, and I'm positive I'm not alone. There are millions of people. There are people who's been talking about being experimented with for 50 years now. And the protocol is, because these experiments are covert and they're being run by people illegally, the protocol is to make you think that you're mentally ill and make everybody else around you think that you're mentally ill. But you know, with 5G that's been rolled out, people are going to start doing research, and we're going to start getting more court cases. And with court cases, you're going to get details. You're going to get specifics. You're going to get time, dates, places, readings, medical quantifications of the effects, opinions, professional opinions, psychological therapists information, psychologist information, psychiatrist information, And this is where um, this is what will show the validity of the claims that's being made. The specifics. The devil is in the details. I like details. I mean, everybody, including myself, makes claims. I make mine, and most of the time as opinions. But when somebody says something, and just got a huge pulse in my chest. When somebody make a claim, then you have to back it up. For me, anyways, before I take it as take it seriously. So okay, so I'm going to try to find as many cases like this, and only because I am going to file a case for myself. And if there are people out there who are going to file cases, then there could be class action lawsuits, because 5G is being rolled out and it hasn't been disclosed properly. There's been no public discussions, no meetings that invited the public to talk about what was going to happen and the possible effects that it was going to have on us, not only us, on the birds and the bees, and and trees and nature. It was never discussed, never disclosed officially. You get newspaper readings, articles, and so on, but that's a form of exposure, a disclosure by the companies. But the government never came out to us and say, well, here is a 5G rollout, and this is what's going to be pumped into your environment. These frequencies are going to be continuously pulsed into your environment. And this is what's going to happen. And this is the possible, if they didn't believe it, here are the possible effects on you as human beings. Let's discuss this, right? Because my arm was just pulsed like a needle in the arm. If somebody was going to put arsenic in our drinking water, well, somebody, let's say the government, an official in the government, came up with the idea to put arsenic in our drinking water and did not disclose it to you, would you have a problem with that? Well, right now there is equivalent of arsenic in our airwaves. And I just burped, and there is the pulse. It's the equivalent of arsenic in the airwaves. It's a carcinogen. Sorry. There's a carcinogen in our environment that's equivalent to lead that our body is absorbing all the time. Not only heat, it's causing changes in our cells, changes on a cellular level. And because we don't see the impact right away, doesn't mean that we're not being impacted on. It's not being, things are not happening to us. It doesn't mean that we're not being acted upon. So, okay, so it's going on 40 minutes. So I'm just going to close it off there. So I'll post these links. There, for people in the building who are reporting crap about me, about being depressed and so on. There are days that I'm hit so hard that if somebody's beating up on you all the time, you will not be a happy camper, and it will show in your face. That's not depression. There's a difference between being sad and being depressed. Being depressed means that you're chronically depressed. It's your state of mind is coming in the way, getting in the way of your living your life. There's no depression here. But sometimes I'm in so much pain that, of course, um, it affects your moods. Pain does that. Kind of makes you feel a little bit down. Okay, so for the liars out there who is participating in the program and experimenting on me with these signals and trying to find reasons to beat me up with these signals, there is no depression, and it would be nice if you'd stop lying. But of course, you're not going to stop, because this is an official experiment that is being run covertly, and it's to the death. And you're supposed to beat me down every time I pop my little head up. And if I do anything good, you're supposed to push it right back down, whack-a-mole style. So all that is part of your program. The people who rolled out 5G and rolled out COVID-19, and I'm saying rolled out because I think it's a pandemic, that shows in my tweets. They have a plan for you too. The saying, what goes around comes around. Karma. It's horrible that it had to happen this way. But when I saw what was being done to me openly, I knew that something big was going to happen, because when there is corruption at this level, to this degree, this openly, it meant to me that something big was going to happen. And I knew that what was being done to me wasn't only meant for me. Well, COVID-19 is an excuse to do to you what was done to me and is being done to me. The kids is what is the most painful, and animals is the most painful part of this for me. To see the kids go to school and to be separated in the classroom is one thing while you're studying. That's not too bad. Probably a good thing to have a lot of space around you. It's psychological. There's a psychological effect on you when you have a lot of room around you and not crowded, which is good. But when you're in the playground and you have this little box, and here's your little play space, and nobody's allowed in, like, what is that about? Like, really? How is that play? That's not play. That's prison. For the poor kid, this poor 6-year-old child, for example, comes out from school, comes out from the classroom that he's enclosed in, or she's enclosed in to start with, and studying, a 6-year-old, and trying to concentrate. And yeah, you come outside of the playground and you have this, 6 feet by 6 feet space that you can't come out of. How is that distressing? And how is that defined as play? The child is in prison. There has to be another way. And here's a very easy solution to the whole problem, right? Make sure that everybody is monitoring their temperature, just like I am, okay? I monitor my temperature all the time. 37.2, and that's because I'm being scanned. I don't have a temperature. 36.6. 37.8. So it depends on where the beam hits, because it's a laser. 37.7. And that's because I'm being scanned. 37.8, by the way, is a fever. 36.7 on the left side. On the right side, it's always hotter. 37.4, drops down immediately. I don't have a fever. 37.5. So my forehead, 36.6, no fever. But underneath the arm, because I'm being scanned, 37.4. It's up and down, up and down, up and down. 36.6. The right side is always hotter. 36.6. Right side, 37.2. No fever. And that's how much I'm being scanned. And my eyes. And that's why my eyes are tearing up. I'm not crying. That's my eyes tearing up because it's burning. I don't have magnets on me. So I get radiated like this all night as I sleep. And even though I shield, my body heats up. So I get up in the morning exhausted. So I've been putting ice on my bed. I just filled up water bottles, the big ones, 2 liters, and I place it along the length of my bed. And you'd be surprised how fast they melt. That's how hot it becomes on the bed, under the shielding. And when I do that, I get up in a fresher state of mind. So if I'm heated up all night, I get up with heat exhaustion. I get up exhausted. So there is yeah, poor some the listener, poor Pippin. I'll be back and watch the video later. I'm proud of you for being brave. They follow me everywhere. I can't say much. Well, there is a silver lining for social distancing. They could follow you, but they can't come really close to you, even though they do to me anyways. They do come close to me, but not as much. Well, gang stalking is the equivalent of contact tracing, right? People are being told to snitch on people. You know, it's like China. We're gonna be snitching on each other. You know, if somebody coughs, call the cops. If you think somebody's sick, it doesn't matter whether it's COVID related or not anymore. It really doesn't matter because I mean, if rashes is linked to COVID, heart attacks is linked to COVID, a temperature is linked to COVID, a cough is linked to COVID. What else? The strangest thing that I read was where the guy was standing and he just fell over, just keeled over in China, and he was taken in and he was diagnosed with COVID, but there was a very low oxygen saturation in his blood. And I think he had a heart attack or something. It was demonstrated by Magda Havas that if you're exposed to very high-powered radiation, and I can't remember the exact number, it immediately, and this is immediate effects, it immediately decreases the red blood cells' ability to transport oxygen. So immediately your body's oxygen starved. Immediately. So it will cause a heart attack. It will cause pneumonia, inflammation too, right? So everything is being linked to COVID. So I heard the health minister say that, or the chief medical officer, sorry, is saying that she's broadening the conditions, the list of conditions to be tested. So whatever symptoms that you show up with on that list, she's broadening that to test for COVID. So, if you show up with a headache, you have COVID. If your eyes are red and blood and stinging, it's COVID, right? Keep in mind that people who had flu shots will test positive. Depends on the test. What is the test testing for? Exactly. And whatever it is it's isolating to determine that you have COVID-19 is that thing that's being isolated to put the flag from red to green, or green to red, is that thing common in other conditions. So I'm going to stop here. It's 52 minutes. Talk to you another time.